Hey everyone, it's been a while, but this one is all about Mantine and how it's not only a decent and interesting choice in OU, but actually it's quite anti-meta. Let me bring up some pictures and well, let me show you what this is about. Why would you use Mantine? There's actually quite a lot of things going for it. Some people notice how the stats are like a parallel to Skarmory's, and while it's certainly no Skarmory, um, water and flying is certainly not as good as steel and flying, but it's very specially defensive. And here's some of its strengths. It's got a ground immunity, which not only means like a spikes immunity and being able to pivot around earthquakes, but it also means you can use it on Superman teams, which is something cool to think about. Obviously, it's got incredible special defense, which lets it wall stuff like Charizard and Moltres. It's also excellent against Swampert. Water Absorb is one of its unique selling points, which lets it walk Croacune. So, any Suicune with only a water stab, so Rest, Sleep, Talk, Calm Mind, Surf. That's the typical variant. There's also like Astacune, which is the same thing with a lot more special attack. Um, which is maybe not like the most meta threat. I mean, I'm putting it as anti-meta, quote unquote, because it's so good against Charizard, which obviously has become OU somewhat recently, last couple months, maybe a year or two ago. I'm not sure. I don't keep up with these things very much, but it's particularly good against those. It's a nice pick against those Pokemon because like Charizard just like does nothing. It's like Fire Blast bounces off, Hidden Power Grass bounces off. Dragon Claw, it doesn't have a special weakness to those things. You're not running HP Electric on a Charizard because this is like the only thing that would hit. Or like Gyarados. HP Grass is just better against almost everything. And Focus Punch is something it uses to mess with Blissey, with Tyranitar. This is resistant to fighting. I mean, its physical bulk is not the best, but it's perfectly fine for Charizard Focus Punch. So yeah, that's why it's like anti-meta. But other things going for it as well as Haze. So against like Subcon Mine Suicune, it can't really get going against Mantine very easily. Thanks to Haze, as well as like Calm Mind Rest with like Roar. I mean, yeah, it can roar you around, but it won't be able to keep its boosts. It won't be able to damage you. Um, Often you can run it on a Superman team, so like who cares about roar anyway, right? Um, or like a Calm Mind Surf Ice Beam Rest variant as well. All it's doing is fishing for freeze and praying. The Celebi as well. I mean, it's not great against every Celebi, of course, like it does get leech seeded. But against like a Calm Mind 3 attack Celebi, it kind of just sits there, toxics it, hazes it, rests up if it needs to, and that's nothing. And then Jirachi, of course, it doesn't beat every Jirachi set. Um, Against the defensive Jirachis, I mean, it's not amazing, but you can use rest on it, and it'll neutralize it for you, if nothing else. Um, Against like offensive Jirachis, obviously there's ones with like Bolt Beam type coverage with Thunderbolt Ice Punch, and it's not good against those. But those that don't use that, so for example, Super Jirachi with Psychic, Fire Punch, HP Grass, yeah, this can like haze it and sit on it and not really care what it's up to. Or you can or like psychic fire punch variants as well without that, like subcon mind. Not necessarily the most common thing. But yeah, it does like all those things. Also, depending on how much you invest in defense as a special defense, it's not a bad switch into Metagross. Yeah, it depends. Like if Sand's not up, that probably helps. Uh, if it's choice banded, it might have a little bit more of trouble. Although with enough defensive investment, it does take a choice band medium mash not too badly, to be honest. Um, yeah. Plus, also it's got stuff. It's not amazing, but I did check it does hit KO Charizard and Moltres. 80 special attack, while not amazing, is still better than Gyarados, which is something. Um, and it does chip pressure to Skarmory. So that's why I think it's anti-meta, quote unquote, and why I think it's a usable Pokemon. I want to talk a bit about like synergies as well. I don't have like a slide for this. I kind of forgot. Um, Obviously, yeah, Superman is something I mentioned. I'll be showing some teams as well in a little bit, and I'll be putting them in the description. But, like Superman's one thing because it's ground immune. Um, and then it's good against all of these Pokemon. Like being able to help check like Jirachi is often quite good for these teams, as that tends to be quite threatening to Superman teams. Although again, it's not great against the the T-Bolt Ice Punch variants like Bolt Beam, T-Bolt Ice Punch. It's you don't have like quite a nice shortening of it. Kind of annoying. Bolt Ice, Thunder Ice. Anyway, it helps against that as well. But I think as an anti-meta pick or like as a tournament pick especially, is to mess with people who really love Charizard, which these days is quite a lot of people as well as like Moltres fans. And you can like wisp it and it will like pressure it a little bit, but it's still not gonna add up that quickly. You can use Rest, you can also use Wish alongside it, and that's something you'll see. I guess the one thing to note though is comparing it against other water types. Actually, we'll get to that in a moment, but other synergies as well. So obviously, like one Pokemon Mantine similar to is Gyarados, and one infamous called Gyarados is called Garrelix. So Gyarados and Steelix. Mantine has the same typing, like the same thing works there, and they're both very defensive Pokemon. Uh, it's Steelix is an awesome rock resist. It's an excellent answer like Aerodactyl. Normal resist as well as excellent against Snorlax, which is nice. It has Roar, so say you face like I don't know, Calm Mind Rest, Ice Beam Suicune. You can force it to rest with Toxic on your Mantine, and then when it's asleep, roar it out with Steelix and rack up Spikes damage, for example. So that's like a bit of synergy they have. Also, of course, it's electric immune and not weak to ice, so it's really good against those Jirachis that the Jirachis that Mantines are good against, and like Mantine resists fire, has a great special defense, is not so worried about psychic. So the ones that can hit Steelix kind of hard, Mantine doesn't care about those. So they actually work together quite nicely against Jirachi. Um, so yeah, that's another core as well. Um, it and anti-electric stuff, so Steelix especially. So I'm gonna compare it against a few other water types because it is important. And like, yeah, Mantine is awesome as anti-menace against all these things. There's another couple of Pokemon as well that provide similar benefits that are more common. I mean, a little bit of the fun of Mantine, like with a lot of Pokemon, it's like, damn, that's cool. I get to use Mantine. But it does have a genuine niche. But this is like the bit which highlights that like that niche is like quite specific. It's still like good in that niche. It does a job, but there are other Pokemon that are more common for a reason, right? So, I mean, there's Gyarados. As you see, while it's got not as good special defense, its HP is a lot better. So the special bulk is fairly similar. But obviously it's got sky high attack and not much special attack to speak of. So, it's a physical threat. It's got Intimidate as well, which is a great ability, but it doesn't like wall Croakian for forever. It's got Roar, it's got Dragon Dance, so it can be a win condition. It's got Thunder Wave, so it can spread paralysis instead of toxic. Those are things that you might want or need on different teams where a water flying type has the kind of synergy you're looking for. I guess it's something like this Pelipper. I mean, I'd never use Pelipper in OU. Don't use Pelipper. It's got like the best physical bulk of the three, though, I think, technically. If you don't count Intimidate, which that's only a thing against Metagross, which does matter. But yeah. Anyway, um, Gyarados can be like a win condition. Of course, you can run it on more offensive teams, but if you're talking more defensive teams, there's like a DDRS variant that's quite cool. Um, Paralysis support can be cool with the right abusers. And Raw is quite similar to Haze. It's not the same, so against the last one, it won't do anything for you. Um, but it does synergize with hazards. Um, yeah, so Gyarados is like the more mainstream Mantine. And Gyarados itself has its own like whole host of problems. But it is very cool against like Charizard and like some Suicune variants and stuff. But that is like one thing. Like the thing with Mantine is it's just incredible against Suicune. Like autoimmune, here's away the stat boosts. Just sit on it. Doesn't really care if you do like a couple boosted ice beams. It's a very, very good special wall for Pokemon that don't carry an electric coverage move. Speaking of, that's something that you have to factor in when building with it, which I'll get to. But there's also Milotic, which again is also pretty awesome against these fire pokes. But Isfik de Grass, not the end of the world, but like against like a Mixmance, against the Charizard, against the Moltres, they'll be able to put a bit more pressure because of that. But on the flip side, A, it gets recover so it can heal itself. B, it's got refresh so it can deal with status, although it is grounded, so there's always a give and take. But these are two Pokemon that you're like, oh, I'm building with Mantine. When you've built with Mantine, then go back and look and be like, am I definitely sure Mantine is better than these two on these teams? Um, Now let me go. Well, first I want to show you. I've like brought Mantine to serious games. There's a video on Jim Cool's channel. I'll link it in the description. This was a Mushy League game at some point. And you see there, I brought Mantine against him. I didn't quite win. I made like a misplay in 1 or 2 points. It was a really awesome set, really awesome game. I was looking for a Charizard matchup and I didn't get it, but it did still like wall. Um, Swampert wasn't like too bad against the Metaverse, I guess. And I had other stuff that was like really interesting in the matchup. So brought this like blazing offense, and I brought Superman Stall. It was a cool game. Um, but yeah, I just want to show you. I put my money where my mouth is. I use these Pokemon. I'm like, Mantine's cool. It's got its place. But now let me get to the team. So yeah, this is the one that I showed in that game, and I want to talk about. Now, this is an older team. I built another couple of teams. I'll show you after this. To show you what else you could do with Mantine, but this was just based on the idea of like, oh, Mantine Superman sounds cool. Uh, One big thing. Oh, obviously you include Skarmory because Spikes plus Ground Immune. It's an instant addition. Flygon is also an instant addition because it's the best DD answer. It also helps against some electrics. You can't really go wrong with a defensive Flygon on Superman, right? Um, but then Blissey, which is just kind of maybe it sounds like a waste to have Mantine and Blissey together, but you have to remember like the few things that like Blissey does help against. Also, remember that Haze goes through subs, so like sub Carmine Cune isn't an issue for Mantine. The issue is Carmine 3 attacks, which Blissey completely walls, doesn't care about, completely fine. Um, which is part of why they go well together. It's also got Seismic Toss here because I needed something to help me with like sub Carmine Jirachi. There's also a Spadef Misdreavus, which can also kind of help. Um, it also has Perish Song, which can help for switches, um, if if you need to, and provides a win condition. I don't love Perish Trap being in the game. I think it should be banned. But while it's there, it's actually a really powerful. Well, part of why it should be banned is because it's really powerful at certain matchups. In a way that's like, very unfair to play around. But it's really excellent against like a lot of Sword Steams, especially if they've got like a Fortress without HP Ghost, and you manage to somehow like deal with um Pursuita. Like if you Perish Song and Mean Look as it like tries to pursue or crunch you, and then you rest up and then you switch, and it's like yeah, it'd be hard to get it back in action, but once you do, it wins the game. So um, also got T-Bolt to Pressure Scum, and this team's also got a Wisp Wheezing. So some of the weaknesses that you still need to cover with Mantine on these teams is oftentimes you still need to deal with Heracross. That's usually quite a big deal. Like Mantine could take a Megahorn maybe, but it does okay damage, but it's not that good. Um, in terms of its damage output, right? So you do need a proper Heracross answer. It also helps against like DD Mance, Dracodance, Gyarados, those kinds of things. And yes, spin blocking, nice too. I cooked up two more teams today. Want to also shout out. I should have done this at the start, but I wanted to shout out Electric Wing Girlfriend or whatever her. I don't know whatever that person's YouTube channel, right? Because they did a video on Mantine a few days ago. I guess I'll link that in the description as well. And I'm like, oh, you know what, Mantine, are you using Gen 3 or you now that you mention it? And I should do a video on that because like that's not something that many people think about, have used, tried out. And I think it's pretty cool. Um, but yeah, this is another Superman team though that I wanted to show off that I made today. Um, and it's also TSS. So this might be like a bit more normal looking. I've got Wish Blissey as well, which is quite nice. I've got Taunt Wisp Gengar. Quite a traditional like way of putting pressure. I've got a Pursuit Tar as well, so this seems very solid against like Gengar as well. I was thinking for a long time about it set. I was like, I need to pursue. I need Flamethrower for Jirachi. It's my like my thing against like a Subcom Mine, T-Ball, Ice Punch Jirachi, for example. And I'm like, I need Raw, if it gets out of hand, um, or like it gets the Snorlax or whatever. And I'm like, what should I do in the last slot? There's so many things you can run. You don't need like Brick Break here or anything like that because you're so good against DD. You don't need like Surf or Rock Move, whatever for Fire types. You've got a Mantine, right? So I mean, like Crouch is always like a good default option, but like I try not to default to it. It's good damage dealing, but I mostly only find it really useful against against Snorlax, where I'm like, oh damn, I need to actually like do damage to this thing. With a strong stab move, right? Obviously it does like good damage to Claydol, to Starmie, to Gengar, but realistically you're either wanting to pursue those things or get out the way, depending on which one you're talking about and when. But I didn't have another idea while I was thinking about it. I'm like, what about Chester Rest Pursuit Tar? Because it does get worn down a bit sometimes, and I feel like this isn't the team for it. Like this T-Tar's not going to get overloaded. I've got fire types covered so well. I've got secondaries for Jirachi. I've got secondaries for Gengar even. Like this T-Tar can be a normal Pursuit Tar, but Chester Rest Pursuit Tar sounds pretty cool on a team where you are relying on it for a lot. So if you're using it to handle like Moltres and Charizard, as well as relying on it to handle your Gengar, and possibly like Jirachi as well, like Chester Rest sounds pretty cool. You can keep on tracking. But yeah, Mantine works fine on TSS. It's kind of a Superman team like Blissey has soft boiled. You're not gonna have like a. It's very hard. We've done it, but it's very hard to do like 6 grand immune Supermans. But this one achieves four. One of them's a trapper, and the other one had a healing move. In fact, two healing moves. It's about as good as it's gonna get, and about as good as you need. So I still consider it Superman. It's a different way of playing it. And of course, I mentioned Mantine plus Steelix. Here's Mantine plus Steelix. Um, yeah, I was playing around with the sets on this one. I'm not 100% confident on it. But I think it's pretty cool. Um, One thing with Steelix is you can't really use it on a Superman structure. It's so weak to Skarmory. It's grounded. You really need either a Magneton or a Spinner. And I went for Fortress. I really love it against Skarmory. I consider it kind of an anti-Skarmory. It also spreads paralysis, which with the Machamp that I ended up fitting, also quite nice. Um, Again, Blissey, because like we said, Blissey and Mantine between them, they just like cover like every boosting special threat. Steelix as well is also really helpful for that. Um, but then this idea of Steelix Machamp, like Steelix is awesome against Aerodactyl. It's pretty darn cool also against Metagross, especially with like Mantine and Fortress backing it up, right? Mantine's ground immune, resist steel, Steelix insane defense, and resist steel as well. So it's really hard to get a good attack on that aimed at both of them. So there's that. Um, but Steelix is not that great against Zeta. I mean, it's not terrible. Like you can't flinch your way through it, which is a plus. But if you see Zeta plus Arrow, it is gonna potentially get overwhelmed, right? So Matchamp is a great fit. When I see like a Steel type that's good against Arrow, good against Metagross, I'm like right. But like not good against DD type. I'm like right. This is the perfect opportunity to use a fighting type because they don't do much defensively, but they do that, and it's something you can just dedicate a whole slot for. And it acts as a wall breaker, so this team's a bit more offensive than the other ones. But Mantine's still holding together like a very solid team. And this team's got a bit of paralysis support, so Zach Cannon Fortress, Thunderwave Blissey as well. Okay, and I did think about Thunderwave Gyarados. But I decided that like Mantine was still a bit more solid against Suicune and having water absorb and everything. and it also like hits Scum a bit better. Although you could try like Thunderwave, Raw, Fire Blast, Rest Gyarados, which I did think about, but that is very jank. But could try it. Um, you could mess around with the Matchamp set for sure. I've often used like a bulk up one, but I'm like, oh, why not like Focus Punch? Because I want to like hit hard, but I also want move flexibility, and I want to like not die in sand. I was able to fit Wish Report here in the case of a Salamence, which is my like Heracross answer. Although to be fair, this team is not that terrible against Heracross without it, which is kind of nice. But you know, it does hit it hard. It is a bit faster. It's a wall breaker, also providing Wish. It can act as a sweeper as well. You could do like mixed DD even here, and maybe try and fit Wish on Blissey. But I like Seismic Toss for gosh, for Suicune for 3 attacks Suicune because like this doesn't have toxic, so you can't just poison Coon necessarily. You'd have to just like Thunder Wave it, and it's like okay, you Thunder Wave like a Suicune, but you do need to actually put pressure on it, and like you can't really switch to anything against like a boosted 3 attack Coon, right? So and this doesn't even have sand, so just seismic toss will do the trick. You could also try Thunderbolt there. I was like, not really necessary. I have that kind of fortress for like Gyarados anyway. So that was my thinking there. So yeah, it's been a while since I've even played any ADVOU, let alone done a video about it. But I could be convinced to do more. I mean, I just felt inspired today to do this. So if you liked it, leave a like, leave a comment down in the description. Try out the teams on the ladder, or even in tours. Counterfeit your Charizard loving friends and watch them be like, "What the hell? I lost to a Mantine. How is this possible?" Right? Um, so yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.